What if one of the most overlooked threats to long-term health is not something you feel today, but something tiny, invisible, and already woven into modern life? I am DrLeoVitas, and this is XENOVITAS, where we explore longevity, anti-aging, and biohacking. And today we are looking at microplastics. We will break down what they are, how they get into the body, why scientists are taking them seriously, and what you can actually do about them without turning your life upside down. This is not about panic. It is about understanding one more hidden layer of stress in the modern world. What microplastics are. Microplastics are tiny pieces of plastic. Some are so small you would never notice them. When most people hear the word microplastics, they imagine tiny pieces of broken plastic floating in the ocean. But that is only part of the story. Microplastics are much more ordinary than that, and that is exactly what makes them so important. They are small plastic particles that come from things people use every day. Some come from larger plastic items breaking down over time. Others come from synthetic clothing, food packaging, dust inside homes, road traffic, and even the normal wear of everyday materials. So this is not just about pollution far away from daily life. It is about the environment we live in, the products we touch, and the air and food around us. What makes microplastics more concerning is not just that they exist. It is that they become easier to ignore as they become smaller. A large plastic bottle gets attention, a tiny particle does not. But from a biological point of view, smaller is often more important. The smaller something becomes, the easier it may be for it to interact with surfaces, tissues, and delicate systems inside the body. That does not automatically mean every microplastic particle is causing harm. But it does mean researchers have a serious reason to study them. Because once a material becomes tiny enough, the conversation changes. It is no longer just about waste. It becomes a question of contact, exposure, and biological effect. And this is where the subject becomes much more personal. We are not just talking about plastic in the environment. We are talking about plastic entering the scale of human biology, how they enter the body. So, how do these particles get into us in the first place? The most obvious path is through what we swallow. Food and drinks come into contact with packaging, containers, preparation surfaces, and the environment around them. Water can also be part of the story. But swallowing is only one side of the problem. We also breathe the world around us. Indoor air is not as clean as many people assume. Dust can carry fibers and particles from fabrics, furniture, flooring, packaging, and other materials that slowly wear down over time. In other words, exposure is not only about what goes into your mouth, it is also about what moves through your lungs every single day without you noticing it. That is part of what makes this topic so compelling. Microplastic exposure is not dramatic. It is quiet. It does not feel like an event. It feels like nothing at all. And yet it may be happening through repeated, low-level contact across daily life. Once inside the body, the question is not simply whether the particles are present. The more important question is what happens next. Do they stay in one place or move elsewhere? Do they irritate tissues? Do they carry additives or chemical residues with them? Do they trigger stress signals even if they are small and hard to detect? This is why the subject matters so much in wellness. Modern health is often shaped by things that do not cause one huge event overnight. Instead, they add a small burden again and again until the body is forced to keep adapting. Microplastics may turn out to be one of those background burdens. Why this matters for aging. To understand why microplastics are being discussed in the context of aging, we first need to be clear about what aging really is. Aging is not just getting older on a calendar. It is not only wrinkles, lower energy, or slower recovery. At the biological level, aging is the gradual buildup of stress, damage, weaker repair, and less efficient function across the body over time. It is what happens when the systems that protect and restore us begin to lose some of their edge. That is why the phrase invisible aging accelerator is such a powerful way to frame this topic. It does not mean microplastics are proven to directly cause aging in a simple one-step way. It means they may be adding to the kinds of biological stress that show up again and again in aging itself. Think about the body as a system already working hard to stay balanced. It has to manage energy, repair cells, control inflammation, defend barriers, and respond to stress from the environment. If something keeps increasing that workload, even quietly, it can matter. Not because it creates one dramatic symptom, but because it slowly adds pressure to systems that are already under demand. That is why researchers are interested. The patterns linked to microplastic exposure often overlap with the same patterns linked to long-term decline. Inflammation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial strain, barrier disruption. These are not random details. They are some of the core themes of how the body wears down over time. So the real question is not, do microplastics instantly age you? The better question is, could they be one more hidden force making the body work harder than it should for longer than it should? That is a much deeper and much more important question. Oxidative stress and mitochondria. One of the most important ways to understand this topic is through oxidative stress. That phrase can sound technical, but the basic idea is simple. Your body constantly creates reactive molecules as part of normal life. That is not automatically bad. The problem starts when there is too much stress and not enough control. Then those reactive molecules can begin damaging the structures they come into contact with. Over time, that kind of stress can affect fats, proteins, genetic material, and cell membranes. But one of the most important targets is the mitochondria. These are the parts of the cell that help produce energy. If they work well, the body runs more smoothly. If they become strained, the effects can spread into energy, repair, inflammation, resilience, and overall function. This is why mitochondria matter so much in the conversation about aging. The body can tolerate a lot, but when energy systems begin to lose efficiency, everything becomes harder. Recovery becomes harder. Repair becomes harder. Resistance to stress becomes harder. That is what makes the research so interesting. Scientists keep seeing signals that microplastic exposure may interact with these same pathways. Again, that does not mean every exposure leads to damage in a direct or equal way, but it does mean the body may recognize these particles as a form of stress it has to manage. And when stress becomes repeated, the effect is not always dramatic. Often it is cumulative. It is the kind of burden that does not announce itself loudly, but still leaves a mark over time. That idea is central to this entire video. The danger is not always one major event. Sometimes the real threat is subtle pressure on the systems that keep you well. Gut barrier and microbiome. If there is one place where this story becomes especially easy to understand, it is the gut. Your digestive system is not just a food tube. It is one of the body's main points of contact with the outside world. It is constantly deciding what gets absorbed, what gets blocked, what gets tolerated, and what gets flagged as a threat. That means it is also one of the places most likely to feel the effect of repeated environmental exposure. Researchers are looking closely at whether microplastics may affect the gut microbiome, the gut barrier, and the inflammatory signals that can spread from the gut to the rest of the body. This matters because the gut does not work alone. It communicates with the immune system, the liver, the brain, the skin, and metabolic systems across the body. So if the gut becomes more irritated, more inflamed, or less stable, the consequences may reach far beyond digestion. That is one reason this subject is bigger than many people think. It is not just about where particles enter the body. It is about whether they increase noise in a system that is supposed to stay balanced and selective. The gut barrier is especially important here. When that barrier is strong, it helps manage what passes through. When it becomes weaker or more irritated, the body can end up dealing with more inflammatory and metabolic stress. Once again, this does not prove a simple straight-line story from microplastics to disease. But it does make the gut one of the most important places to watch. And that idea connects perfectly with modern wellness. Many of the health problems people struggle with today are not caused by one dramatic failure. They are shaped by a slow increase in irritation, stress, and imbalance. The gut may be one of the places where that process begins to show itself first. What human evidence really shows, this is the part where honesty matters most. When a topic gets attention online, people often rush too quickly from concern to certainty. That is exactly what we should not do here. Human evidence on microplastics is still developing. There is a lot we do not fully know yet, and saying that clearly is part of being credible. At the same time, it would also be a mistake to act as if there is nothing to pay attention to. Researchers have detected microplastics in human samples and tissues, which tells us this is not just a theory about distant exposure. It is a real human exposure question. What raised even more concern was the finding that microplastics and even smaller plastic particles were identified in artery plaque in a study that followed people over time. The important point here is not to turn that into panic. The important point is to understand what it means. It means the idea is serious enough that we can no longer dismiss it as background noise with no relevance to health. But we still have to be disciplined. Association is not proof. A finding can be concerning without being final. That is the right way to think about this. We do not need exaggeration to take the issue seriously. And in a way, that makes the story more powerful. Because the real message is not that science has already answered everything. The real message is that the evidence has moved far enough that ignoring the topic no longer looks smart. That is a very different mindset from fear. It is not panic. It is attention. The modern total load problem. One of the biggest mistakes in wellness is looking at problems one at a time, as if the body experiences life in neat, separate categories. It does not. Most people are not dealing with one single health stressor. They are dealing with poor sleep, long work hours, processed food, too little movement, too much sitting, indoor pollutants, chronic mental stress, and then possibly microplastic exposure layered in on top of all that. The body does not experience these as separate headlines. It experiences them as one combined reality. That is why the total load idea matters so much. A person may not collapse because of one small stressor, but when stressors stack, the body has less room to stay resilient. Recovery gets thinner, adaptation gets harder, inflammation becomes easier to trigger, energy becomes more fragile, repair gets less efficient. This is exactly why microplastics fit the XENOVITAS lens so well. The question is not whether plastic particles explain everything. They do not. The question is whether they belong in the list of modern pressures that quietly make healthy function harder to maintain over time. And that is where the real power of this topic sits. It moves the conversation beyond fear and into systems thinking. Once you see health as total load, you stop asking for a single villain and start asking a much smarter question. What is increasing the burden on the body, and what can I reduce? That question leads to much better decisions than panic ever will. How to lower your exposure. Now for the part that matters most in real life. If a viewer finishes this video feeling anxious but not empowered, then the message has failed. The goal here is not to make people feel trapped. The goal is to help them think more clearly and act more intelligently. You do not need to eliminate every possible source of plastic from your life. That kind of perfection usually creates stress without creating much control. What works better is focusing on the habits that are most practical and most likely to reduce unnecessary exposure. One good place to start is heat. Repeatedly heating food in plastic containers is an easy habit to rethink. Choosing glass or stainless steel when practical, especially for hot food and drinks, is a simple and reasonable shift. It does not require obsession. It just requires better priorities. Air quality also matters more than many people realize. Indoor dust is not harmless by default. Better ventilation, regular cleaning, and reducing the buildup of dust can help lower the amount of unwanted material moving through the spaces where you spend your time. Clothing and fabrics matter too. Synthetic materials are so normal that people rarely think about them. But normal does not always mean irrelevant. Even small changes in awareness can help people make better choices over time without becoming extreme. And then there is the bigger point. The body handles stress better when the foundations are strong. Sleep matters, movement matters, whole foods matter, metabolic health matters. If you support the systems that protect, repair, and regulate the body, you are not only reducing risk in one area, you are improving resilience across the board. That is the right way to end this conversation. Not with fear, not with false certainty, but with practical control. Because the future of wellness belongs to people who know how to reduce unnecessary burden without losing their minds in the process. Microplastics may turn out to be one of the defining background health questions of this time. Not because they cause one dramatic symptom overnight, but because they may quietly add to the body's total stress load over the years. If this video helped you understand the issue more clearly, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone it may interest. And tell me in the comments what hidden health topic you want us to break down next. See you on the next video.